I'm very proud to introduce you to my guest today, two brave women who have an incredible story of redemption. Mother and daughter, Katarina MacLeod and Deidre Collazar, welcome.
Thank you.
I say that you're brave because the story that you have to tell has a lot of dark sides to it, but you're here because you want to say that what God can do in a life.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start with you, Katarina. You were 15 years in the sex trade.
Yes.
And before that, a life of sexual abuse, the murder of your husband. Like, just give us a little bit of the highlights, lowlights of your life.
Sexual abuse started at 5, went on for 3 years, which kind of led me into a whirlwind of promiscuity, you know, having sex very young with men, looking for attention, to all kinds of abuse of men, to meeting a man who was very abusive, but I liked him better than the rest, so I married him. And he went to prison. And a mutual friend of ours ended up murdering him and took me with him the next day to show me the body and get rid of some evidence, and then threatened me and held me hostage for 3 years. And from that, what led me into prostitution. I went to a women's support group kind of to deter the police. And a woman recruited me from there and offered me a job who turned out to be his father's ex-girlfriend. Wow. And so then life just whirlwinded from there.
So the reality, well, actually, Deidre, let me ask you, because so you grew up with your mom really being in the sex trade, also addicted to drugs.
Yes.
And also violence, just, you know, like being beat up and the violence of that life. What was that like for you?
It's kind of hard to think about it because it was my normal. So I didn't really know anything different. I just know that our house was tense, and I knew that I wanted my mom to be there for me emotionally, but she wasn't and she couldn't be, which made it really hard, and our relationship struggled for that. So
you probably own some of that, like you thought it was about you.
Yeah, children grow up thinking that they internalize it, so a lot of that still kind of carries with me, and I'm working through it, but yeah, it wasn't a fairy tale.
Katarina, what it was like for you to be a mom while you're living this other reality?
I wasn't a mother. I mean, my days consisted of sleeping all day and working at night. You know, I was very unemotionally available to both of my children at the time, verbally abusive, would scream and yell at them. You know, they seen me drunk and high all the time. Our get-togethers or our mummy time would be taking them to a restaurant where I could sleep on a bench and get the kids to order as much food as they could. That was the life that they knew. So they were exposed to the violence. They were exposed to all of the men that I had coming in and out of the house that I was dating. And it was, now that I think back, I mean, it was such a bad life for children to be exposed to, but it was just, it was our normal.
Were you worried about your children going into the trade as well?
I guess that never crossed my mind, ever. I just didn't even care or think about it, really, to be honest with you.
Things really came to a head when one of the men in your mom's life actually sexually assaulted you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It was really hard because it was somebody that I trusted, and he was one of her boyfriends, and he got close to me. So, yeah, I did trust him, and he was like a father figure to me. And then that happened, and it kind of, any abuse is traumatizing, but it just kind of tore my world apart in a sense, and I still have lingering things that I'm working through.
Of course.
Yeah, it kind of also shook my world with God, of wondering where he was in that. So
you had actually become a Christian quite early. How in the world did you become a Christian in that environment?
Well, we actually went to church a few times with my grandfather, and I remember growing up and believing that there was a God, but I didn't know what a relationship looked like. And I also somehow remember believing that I needed to be good enough to come to God or let him in my heart. And I was at a church service, and they kind of spoke right to that and said that you didn't have to be. And I felt that nudge to go up, so I did. And not from that point that it's been perfect, but it's a journey, and it's been good.
It's been real. And so this assault really shook your relationship with God and what happened there. And then you told your mom, and Katarina, what did you do?
I didn't believe her. I knew in my heart that it was truth, because there were signs before then that I could tell something was going on. But it was the reality of, like, you know, I put men before my children all of the time, and I didn't want to lose another man. You know, I didn't want to be alone. So it was like, there's no possible way, you know, that this had happened. It took me a really long time to understand that this man was very manipulative. He manipulated me. There was a bunch of lies going on. So why couldn't he do it to her? So I was angry at her. And I looked for every excuse to try to put the blame on her and not on him. And at the end of the day, she was a child and he was a 40-year-old man. And I had to realize that, but it tried our relationship. It tore us apart for a few years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so during this time, despite the fact that you're probably kind of mad at your mom at this point, I would think there'd be some anger there, you start praying for her, even when you're mad at her.
Yeah, as soon as I came to know Jesus as my own Savior and that He did save and He could redeem things, I knew I wanted to pray for my mom because I wanted her out of that business. Yeah, and honestly, people look at me and they think, wow, you're such a miracle child and you're so faithful. But I have to say, no, there was a lot of trauma and damage, and I didn't like her all the time. But God really just gave me the strength to pray for her and the perseverance to not give up. So I really credit that to God.
And was there, did you have to work, even before you guys made up or repaired, did you have to do some forgiveness of your mom, even in that time when your relationship was broken?
I had to ask God for love and grace and just mercy because she was hurtful and I am pretty sensitive. So just to even interact with her or tell her I loved her or know how to love her, I had to pray for that a lot. And He did, because that's what Mom remembers and that's what she sees. Even if I don't think I did something perfect, she sees the love that God gave me for her.
And she never ever said, I love you, Mom, growing up. I mean, how could she? So I crave that, right? And it would be such a big deal if one day she did say it, and yeah, it was just such a unemotional relationship between the two of us.
So, Katarina, you actually ended up going to an Alpha course to learn about Christianity.
Yes.
And you didn't really want to be there.
No.
So tell me a little bit about what happened there.
So it was actually her mentor. She had people who kind of stood by her in the church. I always joke and say that God raised her. I didn't. There's no possible way. So I was stuck in a situation where I thought that I was going to go back into prostitution. And I had called Deidre and had told her, and she was very upset. And she called me back a little while later and said, Mom, these people who are my mentors are offering to pay your first and last. And I didn't want to take it, but I ended up taking it. Knowing that if I went back to prostitution, I would never come back at this point. And in doing that, I felt obligated to go to church. And then an Alpha course was being offered, and the woman who has now become my spiritual mother was like, well, I'll go to Alpha if you go to Alpha, not realizing she'd been in the church already 20 years.
Right,
So,
sneaky, those sneaky
right, very
Christians.
sneaky. And she got me with the Monday night dinners, so it was really good. And I went. And in the 9th week, I went very broken because I was there to prove that God was a man. He was just like all the men that I knew. I hated him. I wanted to prove that he was no good. And so I would be the one asking the questions that were very inappropriate. And instead of people's mouths dropping, they would answer me. And in the 9th week, I was suicidal. I left ready to kill myself. And I just heard the small whisper of, just give me a chance. I had given everything else a chance. And I pulled the car over. I left Alpha at 9 p.m. I pulled the car over at 12:35 a.m. And I sat at the side of the road and said, okay, God, okay, I'll give you the chance. And that hole that I had had my whole entire life that I had filled with drugs and rock and roll and sex and material things and men was instantly filled. And there was a peace that was there that I can't explain it, but it's never left. That no matter what I'm going through, and I still go through a lot of stuff, there's a lot of damage done, but I'm not alone. I'm not alone for the first time in my life.
I love that. And so, Deidre, there you're praying for your mom, who seems like a little bit maybe far from coming close, right? Mm-hmm. And then she makes this decision. And obviously, it wasn't like she was perfect overnight, but what was that like for you?
It was like a miracle. I was waiting because I had been praying for years since I got saved. So it was like a gift. It was the same month that I got engaged. But when my mom called me and said that she got saved, I said, oh my goodness, this is so much more exciting. And she didn't get it at the time, but it was such a gift. And she was my maid of honor in my wedding, which it was so exciting for me that she actually had a relationship with God to share that day with me, but in a spiritual way as well.
Now, if this were a Hollywood movie, we would roll credits at this point. But the truth is, like, there's a journey to healing for both of you from the trauma you've inflicted on each other and then life has inflicted on you. And Katarina, I'm sure that forgiving yourself has been a big part of that journey.
Shame and guilt have been huge. And I've learned that when my children come to me and talk to me about the damage or the things that they're suffering, is I allow them to speak. And I give, you know, they're entitled to the way they feel, and I apologize. Instead of making excuses of, oh, well, I was addicted, I was a horrible mother, I have to take that, and I have to own that. And I apologize, and I ask for their forgiveness. And I support them in whatever it is. I mean, Deidre still goes to therapy and does things like that, and I'm there. I'm there. We couldn't be closer today than if we had this whole journey, our whole lives of love.
And what about forgiving yourself? Is that part of the journey?
It was very hard. It was very hard. There's still times that I struggle with that, but I have to realize that I was a victim and that I did the best of what I knew how to do at that time. And I have to pray that God will just change my heart and bring those realities to me. And they're coming. They're coming. And I know today, for the first time in my life, I can say I'm a good mom.
Wow. And Deidre, what is it like for you now to see the restoration of that relationship and where you're at today?
I think it's a rock in my life now. It's a testimony that's really big because I got to see her before and see her now, and I wish people could have. Because they know the weight of the story. No, I love you. But it's something I fall back on when I'm struggling through hard times, or when I know people who are struggling and people think they're too far gone. I remember where Mom was, and I remember where God has brought her, and I trust where He's going to bring her. So it gives me hope.
What would you say to people who are struggling with that family relationship, that mom, that dad and their family, you know, and maybe they're like you know, they're trying to follow God, but their parent is like, woo, or just difficult, you know, what would you say?
Don't give up. Keep on praying and ask God for wisdom and discernment, and He's the God who knows everybody, and He knows your parents' heart or your siblings' heart, and He loves them more than you do, and He loves you more than you know. So lean on Him and let Him be your strength.
How many years did you pray for your mom?
I think I got saved in 2001, so maybe
10 years.
10 years.
10 years.
Or so.
10 years. Wow, that is persistence. I think people need to hear that because they've been praying for 10 or maybe even longer, and they're saying, like, I don't think God's going to answer. I don't think this person is reachable. Is there anyone that's unreachable?
There isn't. And like I really feel that God is a gentleman, and He's going to wait. But I remember times in the industry where I would hear those whispers, and they were falling on deaf ears. I wasn't ready. I wasn't there. You know, I think sometimes God will wait till we're right on our knees, broken, to reveal Himself. We have to be the ones to say, God, I need you. And it takes the bottom sometimes to get back to the top. So, yeah, it's just, nobody's unreachable. I know where I came from. And when I have friends who've known me in the industry and they're just still blown away, I'm blown away. If I really sit there and think about my life, I'm like, oh my goodness, there was no way this was me.
Yeah, hearing your story, I'm blown away. I just want to thank you guys because it takes courage to come and talk so honestly and open up, you know, some of the most painful parts of your life to each other. And, you know, you so honestly talking about the things that you didn't do well. None of us like to talk about that. And you talking about your trauma and your ongoing healing. But I know it's going to help people. So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
Loved you guys being here.
Thank you.
And, you know, if you've been watching this interview today, you are not watching it by mistake. I really believe that this is a God appointment for you. And, you know, so many people write us and call us and they're at the verge of suicide or at the end of their hope, or, you know, a family member that they just think is never, ever going to change. And this story was for you today to know that that is not true. That is a lie. And that God is able to move in anyone's life and that He can move in your life. No one is too far gone. You know, one of the reasons that we're here every day and our passion in this ministry is our prayer lines. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there are people that come here at all hours of the day that just want to pray with you, just want to listen to you and talk to you. This could be the day that your life will change. Give us a call.